The woman sitting next to my husband at the bank was wearing my coat, holding my ID, and signing my name. The worst part, my mother was standing beside her, helping. In that moment, I realized I wasn't losing money. I was being erased. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I walked inside, and everything they planned quietly began to collapse. I was standing in my kitchen wiping dried oatmeal off the table when my phone rang. I almost ignored it. My baby had cried most of the night. My head felt like it was splitting. My 4-year-old had already refused breakfast, and the house looked like a war zone of toys, laundry, and exhaustion. At that moment, my life felt small, repetitive, and endless. Then I heard a voice I hadn't spoken to in years. "Lauren, I need you to listen very carefully." My hand froze mid-wipe. "I'm sorry," I said. "Who is this?" "This is Nina Brooks. I work at Harbor National Bank downtown branch. You helped me years ago." I remembered her instantly. 5 years earlier, back when I still worked as a financial analyst, I'd uncovered fraud inside her department and quietly saved her job. We exchanged polite smiles ever since. Nothing more. This call was not polite. "Your husband is here," she said. "He's in a private conference room." I leaned against the counter, suddenly unsure if my legs could hold me. "That's impossible," I replied. "He's on a business trip. He left yesterday." There was a pause, the kind that tightens your chest. "Lauren," she said softly, "the woman sitting next to him is you." My breath caught. "She's wearing your coat. She has your bag. She showed your ID." The room tilted. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "They're trying to move your assets," Nina continued. "Accounts, property. Your mother is with them, signing as a witness." Everything inside me went quiet. Before that moment, my biggest fear had been getting through another day without falling apart. Suddenly, I understood something terrifying. While I was busy surviving my life, someone was actively stealing it. I didn't always live like this. Before I became the woman scrubbing oatmeal off tables at noon, I was someone else entirely. I used to be a senior financial analyst, the kind who stayed late because she loved the work, the kind who could look at numbers and see what others missed. People joked that I had X-ray vision for fraud. I wore tailored suits. I walked into boardrooms without hesitation. When I spoke, people listened. I earned my own money. I paid my own bills. I trusted my own mind. Then I fell in love. Ethan admired my intelligence, at least, that's what he said. When I got pregnant with our first child, he smiled and told me I didn't need to push myself so hard anymore. "I've got us," he said. After the second baby, it became, "Why stress yourself?" After the third, it turned into, "The kids need you more than another analyst ever could." And slowly, without a dramatic moment, I disappeared. Not all at once, piece by piece. I didn't lose my intelligence. I simply stopped being allowed to use it. By the time I realized I didn't have access to our finances anymore, that I hadn't opened a bank statement in years, that I hadn't signed anything myself, I was already too tired to fight. Exhaustion is a powerful tool. It makes you compliant. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you grateful for reassurance instead of truth. Standing in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, I felt something stir, something familiar. The woman I used to be. "Nina," I said, my voice steady now. "Where exactly are they?" "In conference room C," she replied. "They've been there almost 2 hours." "I'm coming," I said. I left my kids with a neighbor. I didn't change clothes. I didn't fix my hair. I walked out in old jeans and a stretched t-shirt, heart racing faster than my car. As I drove downtown, one thought repeated in my mind. If someone was stealing my life, they had underestimated the woman they erased. I didn't know it yet. But the moment I walked into that bank, I wasn't a tired stay-at-home mother anymore. I was an analyst again. And I was about to see exactly how much they'd taken. I used to believe that control arrived loudly. That it came with shouting, rules, ultimatums. That if someone were taking over my life, I would feel it happening. That belief is why I missed everything. Ethan didn't trap me by force. He did it with patience. At first, it looked like care. When our first child was born, he insisted I rest more. When I worried about stepping away from work for too long, he smiled and reminded me how hard I'd already pushed myself. "You deserve a break," he said. "You've earned it." And I believed him. After the second baby, he offered to handle the finances. "Just for now," he said. "You already have enough on your plate." It felt reasonable, loving even. I didn't notice the first shift because it felt like relief. He paid the bills. He summarized the statements. When documents needed signing, he placed them in front of me already clipped and highlighted. He explained them quickly, confidently, like someone protecting me from stress. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the father of my children, the man who told everyone how smart I was. But trust, I would later learn, is the easiest thing to weaponize. When I asked questions, he laughed gently. "You always overthink." When I pushed back, he kissed my forehead. "You worry too much." When I mentioned returning to work, his tone changed just slightly. "Do you really want strangers raising our kids?" That question landed deeper than he knew. Motherhood already came with guilt baked in. He didn't need to forbid me. He just needed to remind me of what I'd lose if I chose myself. Over time, the conversations stopped being conversations at all. They became conclusions he delivered, decisions already made. I didn't stop working overnight. I stopped imagining myself working. And that's an important difference. My world grew smaller in ways that were easy to explain away. My calendar revolved around nap schedules and grocery lists. My email inbox went quiet. Invitations from friends slowed, then disappeared. Every time I felt uneasy, I told myself the same thing. This is just a phase. But phases stretch when no one is waiting for you on the other side. The exhaustion didn't help. 3 kids, endless nights, constant noise, fatigue blurred my instincts. I didn't have the energy to question things that felt slightly off. That's how control works best, when you're too tired to resist. I didn't notice when I stopped opening bank statements. I didn't notice when my login information stopped working. I didn't notice when our money became his responsibility. I told myself it didn't matter because I wasn't earning any more. That thought still makes my stomach turn. The first time I realized something was wrong, I dismissed it immediately. My beige wool coat went missing, the one I used to wear to meetings, the one Ethan always said made me look impressive. When I asked about it, he shrugged. Probably at the dry cleaners. 2 weeks later, my handbag disappeared. Inside were my ID and a few credit cards I barely used anymore. Ethan claimed he found it later in the car, slightly scuffed. When I noticed my driver's license looked different, he laughed. "You're exhausted," he said. "You're imagining things." So I believed him. I wanted peace more than answers. Then my mother started calling more often. At first, it felt like concern. She asked if I was sleeping enough, if I felt overwhelmed, if motherhood was getting to me. I assumed she was worried. Now I know she was gathering information. Ethan began making comments that stuck with me longer than they should have. "Have you looked at yourself lately? You used to care how you looked. It's hard to take you out like this." Each sentence sounded small on its own, almost reasonable, almost concerned. Together, they did something dangerous. They made me doubt myself. I started avoiding mirrors, avoiding conversations, avoiding parts of myself that reminded me who I used to be. When something feels wrong, but confronting it might unravel everything, your mind looks for an easier explanation. You blame yourself. I told myself I was failing, as a wife, as a woman, as a partner. It never crossed my mind that someone wasn't just disappointed in me. They were preparing to replace me. Not just in my marriage, in my life. By the time I realized I had no access to our finances, no recent work history, and no independent income, I was already isolated, exhausted, and unsure of my own judgment. That wasn't an accident. It was the system. And standing in my kitchen after that phone call from the bank, one truth finally cut through the fog. I hadn't been weak. I had been worn down strategically. I thought losing myself happened by accident. But as I drove toward the bank, one realization hit me hard. Someone hadn't just taken advantage of my silence. They had been counting on it. Looking back, the signs weren't dramatic. That's the part that haunts me. There were no screaming arguments, no slammed doors, no bruises to point at and say, "This is when it started." What I missed were the quiet inconsistencies, the moments that felt slightly off but easy to explain away if you wanted to keep the peace. And I wanted peace. The first sign was my name. Not spoken, used. I began noticing paperwork arriving already completed, my signature printed neatly at the bottom. When I asked, Ethan waved it off. "It's just formatting," he said. "Everyone does it digitally now." I knew better. I used to live inside documents. I knew how language could hide intent, but motherhood had dulled my urgency. I told myself I was overreacting. Then there were the messages. My mother mentioned texts I didn't remember sending. Long messages about being overwhelmed, about wanting to disappear for a while, about trusting Ethan to handle things. When she quoted them back to me, my stomach tightened. "I don't talk like that," I said. She smiled gently. "You've changed." That should have terrified me. Instead, I doubted myself. Ethan began positioning himself as the responsible one, the steady one. In conversations with friends, he joked about how fragile I'd become, how hard motherhood had been on me. Everyone laughed sympathetically. I smiled too, because correcting him would have meant admitting something was wrong. And I wasn't ready for that. The second sign was time. He started disappearing for longer stretches, always with explanations that sounded professional and important. Business dinners, client meetings, trips that couldn't be rescheduled. I didn't question him, not because I trusted him blindly, but because questioning felt exhausting. And exhaustion, again, was doing the work for him. The third sign was how he spoke about me when I wasn't in the room. I didn't hear it directly at first. I felt it. Friends began talking to him instead of me. Decisions about our children were discussed with him first. When concerns came up, people asked him how I was handling things, not whether I agreed. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person with authority. I became a condition to manage. The final sign came from my own body. I started feeling like a guest in my life, disoriented, anxious, unsure of memories I knew should be solid. When I'd question something, Ethan would tilt his head and look at me with concern. "You really don't remember?" he'd ask softly. That question is devastating when you're already tired. It makes you doubt not just the moment, but yourself. Gaslighting isn't loud. It's repetitive. It doesn't convince you of a new reality. It makes you question the one you had. By the time I noticed the pattern, I was already defending him to myself. He's under stress. He's doing his best. He wouldn't hurt me. I never considered the possibility that I wasn't the problem, because accepting that would have meant admitting I was in danger, financially, emotionally, legally. And that was terrifying. It was easier to believe I was failing, that I was forgetful, that I was overwhelmed, that I had changed. Standing in my car outside the bank, waiting for the light to turn green, all of those moments replayed themselves, not as isolated incidents, but as steps in a process. Each small doubt planted carefully. Each reassurance placed strategically. Each truth delayed just long enough. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. And the worst part, it almost worked. If Nina hadn't called, if I hadn't answered, if I decided I was too tired to deal with it, I would have lost everything without ever understanding how. That realization made my hands shake on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from anger. The kind that clears your head instead of clouding it. I pulled into the bank parking garage and sat there for a moment, breathing slowly. I felt the shift happening inside me, the quiet one. The analyst was waking up. The woman who trusted patterns more than excuses. The woman who didn't need permission to ask questions. I stepped out of the car and headed for the back entrance Nina had described. This time, I wasn't walking in confused. I was walking in alert. I thought I was about to walk into a bank. What I didn't know was that I was about to come face to face with the woman wearing my life, and see just how far they were willing to go. The back entrance of the bank smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. It was narrow, quiet, and completely removed from the polished marble floors customers usually saw. Nina was waiting for me near the stairwell, her expression tight but determined. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, even though my heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. "I can't go through the main floor," I said. "They'll see me." She didn't question it. She just turned and motioned for me to follow. We moved quickly through a staff corridor and into a small security room tucked behind the customer service desks. The walls were lined with flickering monitors, each one showing a different corner of the bank. "Conference room C," Nina said quietly. "They've been in there almost 2 hours." She pointed to one screen. And that's when I saw him. Ethan sat at the head of the table, relaxed, confident, wearing a suit I had never seen before. He looked composed, untouched by sleepless nights, untouched by the chaos of home. Next to him sat a woman. She was wearing my coat. Not something similar. Not the same color. My coat. The beige wool one that had gone missing weeks earlier. My breath caught as I leaned closer to the screen. She was holding my handbag. The one I thought I'd misplaced. Her hair was styled the way mine used to be back when I still took the time. Her posture was straight, purposeful. She looked prepared. She looked like the version of me Ethan used to admire. And across from them, pen in hand, sat my mother. Neat, focused, signing documents without hesitation. I felt something crack, but it wasn't my heart. It was the illusion. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And I was watching it unfold in real time. I expected to cry, to panic, to feel dizzy. Instead, everything went quiet. That familiar mental stillness settled in. The one I used to feel in high-pressure meetings when numbers didn't add up and everyone else missed it. I recognized it instantly. I turned to Nina. "I need transaction histories for every account in my name, 3 years back," I said, "and copies of every power of attorney filed under my signature." She hesitated for half a second. Then she nodded and left the room. While she was gone, I kept watching the screen. Ethan leaned toward the woman beside him and rested his hand on her back, not casually, not professionally. Intimately. Not a gesture you make with a colleague. A gesture you make with someone familiar. Someone you're comfortable with. Someone you trust. My chest tightened, not from heartbreak, but from confirmation. When Nina returned, she carried a thick folder and placed it in front of me along with a pencil. I didn't ask for a pen. Pencils erase mistakes. I went through the pages quickly, my eyes scanning for patterns. $10,000 here. 8,000 there. Small enough to avoid alerts. Frequent enough to drain a life. Over $800,000 gone. All transferred into an LLC, registered under Ethan's sister's name. I flipped another page. A general power of attorney filed 3 months earlier. Authorization to sell our primary residence. I had never seen it. Another document showed a loan taken out against our vacation property, collateralized in my name. I had never signed for it. 2 weeks earlier, my life insurance beneficiary had been changed. From my children. To my husband. My hands stilled. Nina, I said quietly, pointing to one line. Where was this power of attorney signed? She checked the system. Downtown branch, she said. According to records, you were physically present. My voice stayed calm. I was hospitalized that week, I said. There are medical records, I can prove it. Her face drained of color. That means forgery, I finished. Identity theft, fraud. She swallowed hard. There's more, I added. Nina pulled up the security footage. On the screen, I saw a woman filmed from behind, wearing my coat, signing documents at the counter. She never turned toward the camera. That's not me, I said. And for the first time, Nina didn't question it. I stepped back from the monitor, suddenly needing air. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop even further. This wasn't just about money. This was about erasing me, legally, financially, permanently. And the people I trusted most were helping him do it. I thought seeing my replacement would be the hardest moment. I was wrong. Because the next truth I uncovered wasn't about the woman in my coat. It was about the man I married and the life he was desperately trying to hide. I've always trusted patterns more than promises. It's why I was good at my job. Numbers don't lie, people do. And standing there in that dim security room, staring at pages of transactions with my name stamped across them, I felt something strange settle in my chest. Not panic. Recognition. This wasn't random theft. It was too careful, too structured. Whoever designed this plan understood timing, thresholds, and attention limits. Which meant one thing. Ethan hadn't panicked yet. He was still calculating. I flipped through the statements again, slower this time. Transfers were spaced just far enough apart to avoid internal flags. The amounts were consistent, not emotional, not impulsive. That told me everything. This had been happening long before the woman in my coat appeared. I pointed to a series of outgoing wires. These all went to the same LLC, I said. Who owns it? Nina typed quickly, then paused. It's registered to Rachel Mitchell, she said. Your sister-in-law. I nodded once. That made sense. Rachel had always been efficient, organized, the kind of person who thrived behind the scenes. She handled paperwork for Ethan's business occasionally, or so I'd been told. Now I knew the truth. This wasn't a solo act. It was a network. I pulled out my phone and made a call, an old colleague from my analyst days, someone who still owed me a favor. Can you look into Ethan Mitchell's company? I asked, quietly. He didn't ask questions. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Lauren, he said carefully. He's done. The company's bankrupt, lawsuits pending, creditors everywhere. My grip tightened. How long? At least a year, he replied. Maybe longer. The room felt smaller. Everything snapped into focus. Ethan hadn't been protecting our family. He'd been hiding behind me. When things were good, he was the success story. When everything collapsed, the debt moved into my name. And now he was emptying every account, preparing to walk away clean while I was left holding the wreckage. The woman in my coat wasn't just a mistress. She was the exit strategy. I closed my eyes for a moment and let that sink in. He wasn't replacing me emotionally. He was replacing me legally. Nina leaned closer. "There's something else," she said. She slid another document toward me. A beneficiary change form. Life insurance. 2 weeks earlier, the beneficiary had been changed from my children to Ethan. I stared at the paper. Slowly. Carefully. Because that kind of change doesn't come from desperation. It comes from planning. I exhaled through my nose, forcing my hands to stay steady. "He was preparing for every outcome," I said quietly. Nina didn't respond. She didn't need to. That's when I realized something else, something colder. If this had gone through, if the house had sold, if the accounts had emptied, I wouldn't just be broke. I would look irresponsible, unstable, legally compromised. The perfect narrative. A woman who couldn't cope. A wife who signed things she didn't understand. A mother who made poor financial decisions. And Ethan. He would be the calm, reliable one. The victim. I stepped away from the desk and looked back at the monitor. In conference room C, Ethan was smiling, laughing, confident. He thought he was winning. That's when I knew something had shifted. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was reconstructing. "Nina," I said, "I need copies of everything, not summaries, originals." She nodded immediately. "And I need time stamps," I added. "Footage, entry logs, every detail." Well, she hesitated. "This is serious." "I know," I replied. "That's why I need it documented." She left the room again, moving faster this time. While she was gone, I thought about my children. About how close I'd come to losing everything they depended on. Not because I was careless, but because I trusted the wrong person. Trust isn't weakness. Blind trust is. And I would never confuse the two again. When Nina returned, she carried a larger folder and placed it beside the first. "I've also alerted the branch manager," she said. "He's holding them in the conference room for a verification delay." I smiled for the first time that day. "Good," I said. "They need to stay exactly where they are." Because now I understood the full picture. Ethan wasn't just betraying me. He was running from something and using my identity as cover. And the closer I looked, the clearer it became. The plan was unraveling. He just didn't know it yet. I thought uncovering the fraud would be the worst part. But the next truth didn't come from documents or numbers. It came from the one person I never expected to be sitting at that table. And the choice she was about to make. I stepped out of the security room because I needed air. The truth has weight. When it lands all at once, it presses against your chest until breathing feels like work. I followed the quiet hallway toward the restrooms, my mind replaying everything I'd just learned. That's when I saw her. My mother stood in front of the mirror, carefully reapplying her lipstick like this was just another errand, another afternoon helping family. She looked calm, composed, normal. When our eyes met in the reflection, her hand froze. "Lauren," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" I turned to face her fully. "What are you doing here, Mom?" She straightened her shoulders, a familiar reflex, one I'd seen my whole life whenever she felt cornered. "Ethan asked me to help," she said. "He said you weren't feeling well, that you were overwhelmed." My chest tightened. "He said you agreed to everything," she continued, "that you wanted him to handle things." I studied her face carefully. "And the woman in the conference room?" I asked quietly. "The one wearing my coat?" She looked away. "He said you didn't want to come in person," she replied, "that it would upset you." I shook my head slowly. "That woman isn't me," I said. "You know that." Her silence stretched too long. "He showed me messages," she said at last. "Texts from you. You talked about wanting to step back, about trusting him completely." "They're fake," I replied. "I never wrote them." She pressed her lips together, the same expression she used when she didn't want to admit she might be wrong. "He said he was protecting the grandchildren," she murmured, "that this was what was best for the family." There it was. The justification. Ethan hadn't convinced her with lies alone. He'd used fear. Fear that I was unstable. Fear that my children needed someone stronger. Fear that questioning him might put them at risk. I took a step closer. "Mom," I said gently, "he's been supporting his mistress with my money for 3 years. She's pregnant. He's bankrupt. And he's trying to leave me with the debt." She shook her head slowly. "That's not possible," she whispered. So I took her hand. I led her back to the security room. On the monitor, Ethan leaned toward the woman beside him and touched her cheek, casually, intimately, without thinking. My mother's knees buckled. She sat down hard in the chair. "He never looked at you like that," she whispered. "I know," I said quietly, "because I was never the one he loved." The words hurt, but they clarified. Nina placed the documents in front of her. Transfers, dates, names, proof. My mother covered her mouth. "I believed him," she said through tears. "I chose him over you." Her crying wasn't dramatic, it was real, shaking, regretful. I sat beside her. "You can still fix this," I said, "but you have to tell the truth." She wiped her face and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. "What do I do?" she asked. I told her. 20 minutes later, we stood outside conference room C. Inside, Ethan thought he was winning. The branch manager had delayed them with a verification issue. Rachel was stacking papers confidently. The woman in my coat sat straight, hands folded, prepared to walk out with my life. Behind me stood Nina, a bank security officer, and my mother. She looked pale but steady. I caught my reflection in the glass. Old jeans, wrinkled shirt, messy hair, no makeup. I didn't look powerful, but I had the truth. And that was enough. I reached for the door handle. Ethan thought he'd already won. He had the documents. He had the story. He had my mother. What he didn't know was that the door was about to open, and everything he built on lies was about to collapse. The moment I opened the door, the room went silent. Not the awkward kind of silence, the kind that snaps tight, like something breaking under tension. Ethan was standing near the window, his phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, it slipped from his hand and hit the carpet. The sound was sharp, final. The woman wearing my coat shot up so fast her chair tipped backward. Without the calm posture, without the practiced stillness, she looked young, startled, unprepared. Rachel clutched the folder of documents to her chest like a shield. The branch manager stared at me, then at the woman beside Ethan, confusion spreading across his face. I stepped forward. "Hi, Ethan," I said calmly. "How was your business trip?" He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Lauren, this isn't what it looks like." I picked up a document from the table and held it up. "General power of attorney," I read aloud. "Authorization to sell my home, liquidate my accounts." I looked directly at him. "Would you like to explain why another woman is signing this in my name?" "It's temporary," he said quickly. "Just for the business, you know how things are." "I do," I replied. "You're bankrupt." The word landed hard. Rachel inhaled sharply. The branch manager stood up slowly. "Sir," he said to Ethan, "is this woman your wife?" Ethan pointed at the woman in my coat. "Yes," he said. "No," I corrected. "I am." I turned to her. "Take off my coat." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she unbuttoned it and let it slide off her shoulders. Without it, the illusion collapsed. She wasn't a partner. She wasn't a replacement. She was just someone dressed up to steal a life that wasn't hers. The room shifted. The branch manager's voice hardened. "This meeting is suspended." Ethan stepped toward me. "Lauren, please." I didn't move. "Sit down," the security officer said firmly. Ethan froze. Rachel began talking rapidly about misunderstandings, legal counsel, paperwork errors, but no one listened. The documents were clear. The footage was clear. The truth didn't need interpretation. When the police arrived, there were no sirens, no shouting, just two officers stepping into the room and asking Ethan to stand. For the first time since I met him, he looked small. As they read him his rights, he kept looking at me, searching my face for something. Mercy. Doubt. Regret. I gave him none. Rachel was escorted out next, still protesting loudly. The woman who had worn my coat stayed seated, staring at the floor. Later, she would testify. She would say she believed him, that she thought this was the only way out, that she was pregnant and scared. I believed her. Because fear makes people do terrible things. But it doesn't erase consequences. When the room finally emptied, I stood there alone, surrounded by overturned chairs and scattered papers. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. The lie had been exposed, not just to the bank, not just to the police, but to everyone who mattered, including myself. My mother stood beside me, silent. "I should have trusted you," she said. "Yes," I replied, "you should have." There was no anger in my voice, only truth. I thought that was the end. But the truth doesn't stop when the door closes. Because what came next wasn't about confrontation. It was about accountability. After the police left, the bank returned to its usual rhythm. People lined up at tellers. Phones rang. Pens scratched across paper. But for me, time had split into two versions before the door opened and after. The days that followed blurred together in a way that felt unreal. Statements, depositions, lawyers, offices that smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner, files stacked on my kitchen table where my children once colored. Ethan tried to contact me from detention. At first, his messages were frantic. Apologies layered over explanations, explanations layered over blame. Then they turned strategic. He offered a quiet divorce, full custody, property, anything if I withdrew the charges. I refused. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability. The court moved faster than I expected. Fraud, forgery, financial abuse, identity theft. The words felt heavy but accurate. Rachel's involvement became impossible to deny. The LLCs, the transfers, the coordination. She insisted she was helping family. The judge didn't agree. The woman who wore my coat testified. She didn't cry on the stand. She looked exhausted, older than her years. "I thought he loved me," she said. "I thought this was the only way." Fear explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. When the verdict was read, I felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just a quiet finality. Love doesn't vanish loudly. It leaves in silence. My mother stood beside me in the courthouse hallway afterward. "I chose wrong," she said. "I believed him." She looked smaller than I remembered. "You fixed it when it mattered," I replied. "That's what counts." That night, I went home and tucked my children into bed one by one. Everything was uncertain. But for the first time in years, it was honest. Starting over didn't feel brave. It felt exhausting. I sold the house we'd lived in for years. Too many memories lived in those walls, too many lies. I bought a smaller place in a quiet neighborhood close to my son's school and my daughter's daycare. Nothing fancy. Just safe. Just mine. The children struggled in different ways. My oldest asked careful questions. My youngest barely noticed. My daughter missed her father and woke up crying for weeks. We found help. We talked. We waited. Healing doesn't follow a schedule. 6 months later, my phone rang. It was my former boss. "You were the best analyst we ever had," he said. "If you want back, the door is open." I set conditions. Flexible hours. Time for my kids. Fair pay. He agreed without hesitation. On my first morning back, I stood in front of the mirror wearing a simple suit. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not the exhausted mother. Not the ambitious professional. Someone stronger. Someone who had been tested. That evening, my son looked at me and said, "Mom, you look like yourself again." I smiled. I wasn't rebuilding a career. I was rebuilding a life. People think winning looks like celebration. But the truth is, the real victory came later. When I realized what revenge actually means. People always ask how it feels to win. They expect anger or celebration. They imagine satisfaction looks loud, dramatic, unforgettable. But winning didn't feel like any of that. It felt quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in after a storm, when the air finally stops vibrating and you realize you can hear your own thoughts again. For a long time, I thought revenge meant humiliation, that it meant watching someone else fall the way I had almost fallen. I was wrong. Revenge isn't screaming. It isn't public shame. It isn't destruction. Real revenge is clarity. It's walking away with your mind intact, your children safe, and your future back in your own hands. I'm 41 years old now. I'm a mother of 3. I work hard. I get tired. Some days still feel overwhelming, but the difference is this. Every decision I make is mine. No one speaks for me. No one signs for me. No one plans my future in secret. I trust myself again. That trust didn't return overnight. It grew slowly in ordinary moments. Paying bills with my own name on the account, making choices without asking permission, sitting in silence without feeling afraid of it. The small freedoms mattered more than the big ones. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how close I came to disappearing. How easily it almost happened. Not because I was weak, but because I was tired. And that matters. If you've ever felt erased, controlled, or slowly pushed out of your own life, understand this. You are not broken. You are not foolish. You are exhausted. And exhaustion can make even the strongest people doubt themselves. But the person you used to be, the one who trusted her instincts, her intelligence, her worth, she doesn't vanish. She waits. She waits for the moment when something finally feels wrong enough that silence becomes impossible. For me, that moment came in a phone call. For you, it might come differently. But when it does, listen. Not to the fear. Not to the voices telling you to stay quiet. Listen to the part of you that recognizes the pattern. That part is still there. I didn't destroy my husband. He destroyed himself. All I did was refuse to disappear quietly. And that refusal, that simple, powerful choice, changed everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt controlled, overlooked, or slowly erased, you're not alone. Like, share, and comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. This isn't just my story. It's a reminder